joining Time Out with PSOA, where sports officials share their stories to help recruit, train, educate not only sports officials, but players, coaches, administrators, and fans. Through this information, we're going to help make us all better for the game.
Thank you for taking time out with PSOA. Back again with our podcast is Andrew Fulton. We had such a great time talking about catches and strikes and got our minds thinking a lot about, as an umpire, the myths that people think they know the rules. But what are the rules? You know, as an active official, there's two things that scare me the most. The first one is having a partner who read the rule book one time. You know, you read the rule book one time, you're like, oh, I know the rules. No, you don't. Never stop reading the rule book multiple times. Then the other one that scares me the most is a coach that knows the rules better than me as an umpire. So, Andrew, welcome back to Time Out with PSOA. And last time we had you introduce yourself as a sports official. Now let's go back into history. Introduce yourself as Coach Fulton.
You know, along with my adventures as a sports official and a baseball umpire for 25 years now, I spent a nice little 4-year stint as a high school baseball coach in Malcolm, Nebraska. And so I coached the Legion baseball team there for 4 years, and it was four of the most educational years for me as a coach and as a sports official. I also coached wrestling at Wilbur-Claytonia High School way back in the day for a few years. But so I've had a little bit of experience in the coaching realm as well. So that's kind of my experience in the coaching realm, but it mirrors and has definitely affected my my experience and my viewpoint, my insights, and my philosophies as a sports official too.
All right, so this is how this podcast is going to go. We're going to share a short story, shall we say a case play that happens in baseball. And I'm going to be the coach coming out on Andrew. And maybe even later on, Andrew will be coming to me as a coach. So the first myth of baseball that we're going to try to bust today is the hands are part of the bat. So here's the situation, Andrew. We got bases loaded, bottom of the 7th inning. We got 2 outs. Batter swings. The pitch ball goes off of the batter's hand, back to the pitcher. The pitcher overthrows the first baseman, and 2 runs score. What are you going to do as an umpire?
Well, this involves a couple of different rules, but the biggest one is when does the ball become dead? So in the rule book at all 3 levels, high school, college, and professional baseball, all say the same exact thing. The ball becomes dead when a pitched ball touches a player or a player's jersey. That's what it says. A pitched ball becomes dead as soon as it touches a player or a player's jersey, or a batter or a batter's jersey. I'm sorry, not a player. A batter or a batter's jersey or equipment. So that seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it, Sean? Seems pretty straightforward to me.
Depends on which team I'm coaching.
Well, the rule itself is very straightforward. The ball becomes dead. When a pitched ball hits or touches a hitter or the hitter's equipment or jersey. So, according to the statement you just made, looks like the ball's dead as soon as it hits his hand, right? So we can't have an overthrow. We can't have anything else happen at that point in time. So that's the part of the rule that really comes into play here. You always hear people say, well, the hands are part of the bat. Sean, when you take a bat, if you hold it with 2 hands, straight out in front of your body, if you open your hands, does that bat fall to the ground?
Yes, sir.
That doesn't look like the hands are part of the bat to me.
And what I always tell coaches, hey, coach, when that bat was purchased, did it come with a pair of hands? And the answer is no. All right.
Yeah, well, I'm just going to say I probably wouldn't be that much of a smart aleck. I try to keep things down the middle, Sean. So, but the biggest thing is this myth comes into play a few times. If you put it a different way, a guy swings and misses, but the ball, it's such a bad pitch and such a bad swing, the pitch hits him in the leg. That ball's dead too, right? So we have a dead ball. The second part of that rule applies now too. So the second part of the rule that goes in is whether or not the pitch is a strike or not. Is it a swing or is it not a swing? If they swing through and we have a full swing, it's obviously a strike. It's a dead ball. It's what we call a dead ball strike. So the umpire will call timeout, say that's a strike. Now, what's really crazy, what really doesn't make people, people don't understand this part of the rule, is that a dead ball strike is not the same thing as a foul ball, right? So if it's strike three and the batter's out at that point in time. So if I swing and the pitch hits me, it's what we call a dead ball strike. It's not a foul ball, even if it's off my hands. So where you see the most tension with this play right here is probably on the pitch that's kind of up and in. And we've got a check swing or a half swing. And the pitch is up and in. And it's either off the knob of the bat or it's off the hitter's hand. We see this all the time, right? In Major League Baseball, it's actually a play that happens a lot because these hitters are getting ready to swing. That pitch is coming in at 95 miles an hour. They have to be prepared to hit it. It may break. We start our swing. We stop. And the ball hits in that situation around the knob of the bat and the hand. So as the umpire, we have to determine whether the ball hit the hand, whether it hit the knob, and whether or not the hitter swung at the pitch. So timing in those situations, giving yourself the opportunity to process all the information and not getting in a hurry will save us a lot. Hitters give us a lot of information on their own without even really meaning to. They start shaking their hand right away. Seems like they probably got hit in the hand to me. And then the only other question at that point in time is whether or not the hitter swung at the pitch, and whether we have a dead ball strike or whether we have a hit by pitch, we're going to get the hitter first base. So hands are not part of the bat. If it does hit the hands or any part of the hitter, and the hitter swung at the pitch, it's a dead ball strike, which can be strike three.
Baseball myth number one, busted. Second one, we're going to stay on with that batter. So here's the situation. In the third inning, runner stealing, batter swings, it goes off the bat into the fence. The umpire calls time, foul ball, sends the runner back. Fifth inning, batter swings, goes off that bat, sharpened directly into the catcher, and the runner is now allowed to stay at second base. Andrew, the runner can't advance on a foul ball.
And my response to that, Sean, every time is, you are absolutely correct. And why I say that is because that's not a foul ball. So there's two different definitions that we're dealing with here. The foul ball situation is anytime a hitter makes contact with the baseball with his bat and the ball does not go into fair territory, or it is not secure by the catcher. So if the ball goes straight from the bat, sharp and direct to the catcher, and the catcher secures it, then that is what we call a foul tip. And the ball, by rule, at all three levels, OBR, Federation, NCAA, by rule, the ball remains alive and in play at every level. So you see this all the time. They foul tip it to the catcher, and he throws the guy out at second base, and that guy's still out at second base. The ball remains alive and in play if it's what we call a foul tip. If it's a foul ball, meaning the catcher does not maintain firm and secure possession, and it doesn't go sharp and direct to the catcher, then we have a foul ball in those situations. Then the runners have to go back. So that's a pretty simple one, but especially at the lower levels, you're going to run into this where people don't necessarily know that rule, or you have people in the stands who get people going. One dad says something stupid, and then that herd mentality pops in, and everybody's on you at that point in time. The biggest thing is just to know the difference of the definition of a foul ball versus a foul tip.
Very good. Going to get to myth number 3 here. Runner on second base, stealing third, and the batter, being a very kind citizen, simply ducks, lowers down so that catcher can make that throw to third base, and boom, by that batter ducking, it goes off the batter's helmet, or the catcher contacts the batter, or that ball goes off the bat, and the coach goes, "My batter is in the batter's box. They're protected." What do you got?
Well, so there's a couple of things here. The coach isn't necessarily wrong, right? The batter does have a lot more protection in the batter's box than he or she does outside of the batter's box. Would you agree with that, Sean?
I would agree with that.
Yeah. So the biggest thing is that if the rule says this at every level too. If the batter makes an action that hinders or impedes a catcher, the batter is not completely entitled to do whatever he or she wants to do in that batter's box. And this is at both softball and baseball. The batter is not allowed to do anything that impedes or hinders the catcher. Meaning that if the batter stands there and does nothing, and the catcher throws the ball into the hitter's helmet, we've got nothing, Sean. We've got nothing, right? The batter can't simply disappear. You know, they're not allowed. They're not shapeshifters. They can't just disappear. But if the hitter takes a step or moves into a throwing lane, or moves into a position that hinders or impedes the catcher from throwing the ball to third base, then we have interference. The biggest thing is simply being in the batter's box does not give you carte blanche to do whatever you want to. If you are in the batter's box and don't move, you're pretty well protected in those situations. But the biggest thing is, and you see this all the time, they'll take a step backward because they think that they think the catcher's going to come up and throw in front, and the catcher's actually coming up to throw behind, and they take a step backward, and it's in the throwing lane of that catcher. Now we've got interference.
Yep. And coaches out there, listen to this podcast. That's what we try to teach coaches to educate their players. When your batter or when your runner stealing third base and that batter's not swinging at a pitch, don't move. Let that catcher move around your batter as a stationary batter. It leaves all judgment out of the umpire's decision-making of did that movement impede or not. Next one that comes up, caught third strike. We got a 1-2 pitch coming in. Batter.
Sean, he caught it clean. He caught it clean.
Yeah, he caught it clean. Right off the dirt, caught it clean. That's an out. That's an out. What do you got, Andrew?
So, well, there's a couple things. Drop third strikes. Anytime we have a runner on first base with less than 2 outs, the drop third strike doesn't matter, right? So it's only when first base is unoccupied or we have 2 outs that we're going to have a drop third strike situation. The catcher, in order to avoid a drop third strike situation, has to secure the baseball before it touching the ground. Simple as that. That's the rule. He has to secure the baseball before the baseball touches the ground. So whether he catches it clean off the dirt or off the turf, that doesn't matter. If it touches the ground before the catcher secures it, it's a drop third strike situation. So with the first base unoccupied or with 2 outs, they would be forced to try to put out the runner. The runner's not put out yet until they retire the runner before the runner gets to first base, or if there's a forced situation, stepping on home plate with 2 outs. All right, those are the only options.
So for that pitch ball to be caught, it must be caught before it hits the dirt.
It must be secured, yes.
Next one that comes up, and this doesn't quite come up as often, but we see it entering the game as we see it played out on television. We have runners on first and second or bases loaded. We have a bunt that goes high up into the air, and the fielders allow the ball to hit the ground. And that coach is like, we want an infield fly. Wait, no, they intentionally dropped that ball. What do you have in this situation?
Well, those are two different things, Sean. Those are two different things.
But I'm a coach. I want my team to win.
Well, you need to make a decision. Which one are we arguing? Did they intentionally drop the ball, or is that an infield fly?
Which one are you going to give me?
Sean? Well, okay. So let's start with the infield fly situation. By rule, in order for a ball to be an infield fly, the infield fly rule specifically prohibits a bunted baseball from being considered an infield fly. It specifically prohibits it. So a bunted ball can never be an infield fly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, fine. Throw that argument out the door then.
Yeah. Yep. So it can't be an infield fly. But we have a second rule, as you mentioned there, and that is the intentionally dropped ball. And this rule is the same at all levels too. OBR, NCAA, NFHS rules are all the same with this rule. Anytime we have a force play on the bases, so anytime we have a runner on first base, right? Anytime we have a runner on first base, the defense is not allowed to intentionally drop a baseball. Well, he intentionally dropped it, right, Sean? He just let it fall right in front of him.
Exactly.
Would you agree?
Exactly.
Oh, but there's another part of that rule, though. What does it mean to intentionally drop a baseball? It's not exactly what you think it means when you hear those words. So there is a definition for it. In order to have a baseball that's intentionally dropped, it has to be touched by the fielder. So if a fielder allows a baseball to fall untouched, that is completely legal. They are assuming the responsibility and the liability at that point in time. If they guide the baseball to the ground, if they let the baseball bounce off their chest, if they touch it with their hand on the way down and allow the ball to be intentionally drop, then we have a problem. If it goes in their glove and they open their glove immediately, we have an intentionally dropped ball. This is where that rule falls into place. So to your original example, Sean, we have runners on first and second. We're going to try to bunt these guys over. We don't have a very good bunt. The bunt pops up. The pitcher allows the ball to fall right in front of him, picks the ball up and throws to third base for an out. Right? We don't have an infield fly because we have a bunted baseball. If it was if he swung at it and it popped up, that's a different story. But we have a bunted baseball that goes up. He allows it to fall directly in front of him, doesn't touch it prior to it touching the ground. That's legal, 100% legal. That's really not the one where we see the intentionally drop ball the most. We see it most of the time with a line drive to the shortstop or the second baseman with a runner on first base, and they think they're going to get a quick, cheap double play out of it, and so they intentionally drop it and let it, and then turn the double play. At that point in time, we'd call timeout and say that's an intentionally dropped ball. The penalty for an intentionally dropped ball is what, Sean?
Time.
Time.
Batter
What's the penalty?
is out.
Yep, we're going to call the batter out, and we're going to send everybody else back to the base they legally occupied at the time of the pitch. So that's what we're going to do with the intentionally dropped ball. Now, the reason why that rule and the infield fly rule are somewhat connected is because both rules have the intention of protecting base runners in situations where an easy double play is possible if we were to allow the defense to do a lot of other things. So they're not allowed to intentionally drop any batted baseball with a force play situation on the bases.
Very good. So coaches out there, you do want to teach your players in certain situations, certain players, to allow the ball to drop. But if those players intentionally touch the ball, that's the illegal act. All right, here's another fun one. Umpires hear it all the time. We'll say, here, ground ball to shortstop. Shortstop throws it to first base, and we hear one sound. The ball hitting the glove, the foot hitting the rubber base at the same time. We have a tie. The tie goes to who, Andrew? Who does the tie go to?
Goes to the umpire. I think. That's not what the rule says. The rule says something specific in this.
What?
Right?
There's a rule for this?
There's a rule for everything, turns out. Well, there's not a rule for everything, but you know what? We're not going to talk about the moose coming on the field in Alaska. There is a rule for this, okay? Now, what does the rule say, though? The rule says that in order to be safe at first base, the runner must attain first base prior to the fielder tagging the base with the baseball. Huh. So what does that mean then? If we think about that, the runner, to be safe, has to beat the tag. Oh, so if we actually have an actual physical tie, which, by the way, Sean, you and I both know is it is physically impossible, but in like the real world, it happens, right? We say things are ties that aren't actually ties. If we have an actual tie that we judge to be a tie, the batter's out, right? The batter's out at first base because they failed to reach first base prior to the fielder tagging the bag with the baseball, with firm and secure possession of the baseball.
Another myth of baseball busted. All right, go ahead.
Here's the other one though, Sean. What if we have a tag play at the base though? What if we have a play where it's not a force out at first base? We've got a runner diving back into first base. And we have a fielder who catches a pickoff throw and tags the runner. And it's a tie back into first base. What does the rule say there? Any idea? Any thoughts?
I'm the coach right now. I haven't been in the rule book for quite some time.
Huh. Well, turns out that the rule defines what it is to tag a runner out. And that means you have to tag a runner while the runner is not on the base. So if it's actually a tie, going back into the base on a tag play, on a non-force out tag play, then we have ourselves a safe call, which is somewhat difficult for us to comprehend, right? The runner must beat the ball to first base, must beat the tag at first base on a force play, but on a tag play, they have to. It's actually a safe situation, and the defense is required to tag the runner while they're off the base. The only time that changes, Sean, is if we have a tag play on a tag on a force play, and that's just a fun thing.
Yeah,
that's just a whole fun situation. A lot of things going on there.
Baseball's a beautiful game. Half the time for the offense, half the time for the defense.
Sometimes you just got to umpire.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just got to umpire.
Another situation that we hear a lot is the term or the myth of 1+1. So here's the play. Runner on first base, ground ball to the shortstop, but this runner on first base was stealing on the pitch. They're going to try to turn 2, and the umpire goes safe at second base, and then the throw goes over the first baseman and into the dugout out of play. So the umpire gives 2 bases, 1+1, I think. All right, and that runner on first is going to score, and that batter runner is going to second base. Whoa, Andrew, 1+1. How did the runner that started at first score? What's the myth? What am I missing?
This is fun. This is lots of fun, Sean. Well, there's a few things here. Base awards are one of the most misunderstood things in all of baseball. So you hear 1+1 a lot, and then you hear, what they mean by that is that's the base the runner's going 2+1. And actually the one where I think we see it the most often is a pickoff with a runner on first base. You got a pick off to first base that goes out of play. Well, he's diving back to first base, so that's the base he's going to, +1. So we're going to give him second base, right? Well, even if he steps off and throws the ball over there, we're going to give him second base. Well, actually, it turns out base awards are the same at every level of baseball. We award for runners for balls that go out of play. We award 1 base for every ball thrown out of play by a pitcher. So a pitched ball or a ball thrown out of play by a pitcher. So that means a pitcher makes a pickoff play from the rubber, meaning it's a jump turn, straight turn to straight throw to third base. Any type of play without legally disengaging the runner. And that ball goes out of play. We award everybody on the baseball field one base from the time of that throw, okay, or the time of the pitch. If it's a pitch ball that bounces off the catcher and goes into the dugout, one base, time of pitch. We award on every thrown ball, we award two bases on every thrown ball that goes out of play. Always. The only thing we have to think about now is whether that thrown ball, we're going to award that from the time of the pitch or from the time of the throw. So if we have a thrown ball and it's the first play made by an infielder, we have a thrown ball and it's the first play made by an infielder. This is the only time we're going to do this. We're going to award two bases to everybody on the baseball field from the time of the pitch. So, runners on first and second. We got guys stealing, right? The shortstop a ground ball to the shortstop. Shortstop fields the ball. The runner from first has already gotten to second base. The shortstop gets up and launches the ball over the first baseman's head into the stands. We're going to award two bases from the time of the pitch, meaning the runner from second base is going to score. The runner from the first base is going to get third base, and the batter runner is going to get second. You on board with me here so far?
I'm following. I'm following you. Absolutely.
Okay. So the only time that we're going to give two bases from the time of the pitch is when it is a first play by an infielder. Any other situation, whether it be a play by an outfielder, any throw by an outfielder, if it's not the first play by an infielder, those two situations, we are going to award two bases from the time of the throw. So in the situation that you gave earlier, where they attempted to get the guy out at second base but didn't get him out, that's an attempted play. Are you with me on that? You agree?
I'm starting to understand it. Okay. Yeah.
So that's not the first play by an infielder anymore. Now that second baseman wheels and throws the ball out of play, right? Not the first play by an infielder anymore. Now we're going to award two bases from the time of the throw. And the time of the throw is when the ball leaves the player's hands, the thrower's hand, okay? So it's not when the ball crosses the fence line. It's not when it rolls into the dugout. It's when it leaves the player's hand. So we're going to award two bases from the time of the throw. There is one caveat, and I forgot to mention this, Sean, when we talked about two bases from the time of the pitch on the first play by an infielder, is that if it is the first play by an infielder, but everybody, including the batter runner, has advanced a base, then we are going to take that from the time of the throw. The situation where that's going to apply is going to be like a shortstop kind of booting the ball in front of him. So we have a runner on first base, and we have a ground ball to the shortstop. It eats him up a little bit, bounces in front of him a bit, and he's going to pick it up. And the batter runner has already crossed first base, but he thought maybe the ball went to the outfield, so he makes a turn to go to second base, and they're going to try to throw behind him at first base. Even though that's the first play by an infielder, everybody, including the batter runner, is advanced to base already, so we're going to take that one from the time of the throw. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense.
So we're going to score the runner that was on first, who was on second when the throw was made. We're going to score him, and we're going to put the batter runner at third base at that point in time, because it's from the time of the throw. So the only time we're going to advance people two bases from the time of the pitch is when it's the first play by an infielder, and not everybody has advanced one base.
Very good. So the myth of 1+1, throw it out.
Throw it out. Yeah.
Two base award.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, two base awards. And you're going to hear 1+1 you'd be amazed at how many college baseball coaches don't know base award rules. So it's something you just need to make sure you say, hey, 1+1 is not the rule. It's 2 bases from the time of the pitch or the time of the throw. And let's make sure we know our terminology and the rule.
Excellent. So here I am. I'm getting ready for the 2023 season, coaching a 12-year-old team. And love my son, SJ. Hits the ball, runs super hard. A good 70 is what we call it here at that age level. He beats it out. So he legally beat the ball to the base. And
he must run like his mom and not like his dad then.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. Runs with the wind, baby.
Mm-hmm.
And, SJ's SJ. He likes to go against the envelope sometimes. So instead of going back to first base in foul territory, he comes back to first base in fair territory. And they apply a tag because he came back into fair territory. He's out. The base runner must come back in foul territory, Andrew. Isn't that the rule?
Let's just even take it a step further. Let's say he can't turn to his left, right? Can't turn to his left. He's got to turn to his right when he gets past first base. Well, that's actually not what the rule says. So in order for us to umpire this rule, we have to umpire whether or not the rule says a runner may run past first, about a runner may overrun first base, and as long as they're not making attempts to advance to second base, they remain without liability to be put out. So what is an attempt? That's what we got to think about. An attempt is literally we have to judge a little bit of an intent. We have to put our mind reader hat on, get the tarot cards out, and read some palms in this situation. That's not true. But we do have to judge a little bit of their intent and what they're attempting to do. So if they make a sharp step towards second base, that's an attempt, right? If they look, they turn around, they're like, oh, that ball got away. Make a sharp jab step towards second base. And like, oh, nope. And they play Joe Cool trying to walk back to the base. They're not without liability to be put out at that point in time. If they just simply overrun first base and turn to the left and come right back to first base, and in your judgment, there was no attempt to advance to second base, we got nothing. There is a way that we miss this a lot as first base umpires because we don't stay focused on the runner long enough. If we call the guy safe at first base, we need to make sure we keep our focus on the runner and what they do after they go past first base. Because sometimes these teams will try to deke us into calling them out, and they're like, go tag him, and they'll tag him. And I've seen umpires that have fallen for that trap and called the guy out without really strong knowledge of what actually happened. So you got to make sure you know the whole thing, see the whole play, and umpire that from start to finish the whole way through the base. But at the end of the day, if they make an attempt to advance to second base, they are now no longer protected to go back to first base.
So umpires out there, don't call everything you see, but you have to see everything you call. Next one, a myth of baseball. We hear this, whether it's a play at the plate and they're not forced to advance home, so runner on second base, base hit to the outfield, and the coach is sending them home. Or we have bases loaded, and no matter what base the infielders throw to, home, third, second, first, in either case, the runner doesn't slide. The runner doesn't slide, and the result of the play, the umpire goes safe. Boom, here comes the coach. Andrew, it's mandatory that they slide. They have to slide. They are forced to slide. How is that runner not out?
Well, this is a rule that is so misunderstood at a lot of levels of baseball. And the reason it's misunderstood, and I'm gonna go to bat for some coaches here. It's misunderstood because there are a lot of leagues that implement what we call house rules, right, Sean?
Mm-hmm.
Especially at the lower levels. When we get to 7 and 8 year olds, 5, 6, 7 year olds, whatever it is, they have what are called house rules, and they may require runners to slide in order to not be ruled out. But OBR, National Federation rules, and NCAA rules do not require a runner to slide ever at any base. Does that sound crazy to you? Sounds a little bit crazy, doesn't it? They don't ever require a runner to slide. What they do is give runners ways that they can always be safe. Right? So let's start with the play at home plate. There's a lot of different parts of this play let's start with a play at home plate where there isn't a force play. Okay? Runner on third base, we have a passed ball. Catcher goes back to get the passed ball, flips the ball to the pitcher, and he's attempting to tag the runner coming home, and the runner coming home does not slide. Okay. The runner is not required to slide coming into home plate. What the runner is required to do is make an attempt to avoid contact. Right? So if the runner is not going to slide, they must make an attempt to avoid contact. They also can never be, ever be guilty of what's called malicious contact. So malicious contact that's defined at the federation and at the NCAA level. There's no like real rule for it in OBR, but a lot of the leagues that use OBR's rules put into place for a malicious contact rule, and it's pretty much the same at every single level. You cannot make contact with the intent to harm, hurt, or injure another player. So that is pretty simple. So if it's malicious contact at any level, right, you can just go ahead and say timeout, that's malicious contact, and that runner is out. Okay. The runner must attempt to avoid contact. So they can't just run over the pitcher, whether it be malicious or not. They can't just run over the pitcher. They could be guilty of interference at that point in time, right? So they have a couple of options. Number one, they can give themselves up, right? So if they just come in standing up and allow the tag to happen, that's legal. Or they can slide legally, right? So if they slide legally, meaning that they're on the ground, one of their buttocks is on the ground. If it's feet first means feet down, right? One of the buttocks on the ground prior to contact occurring with the fielder, and that's legal. If it's head first, they just have to be on the ground prior to contact being made. So they can't dive head first into somebody, regardless of where the player's at. They can't slide feet first with their spikes up, and they have to be on the ground prior to contact being made. So no flying karate kicks going on here into the fielder. Or the other situation is, let's say the runner actually beats the plate to the home plate, right? They run through home plate prior to the tag happening. That's legal as long as there's no malicious contact and they don't interfere with intentionally with the player making a play on them. Does that make sense for you? With no force play, we're not required to slide. We're just required to avoid contact, slide legally, or give yourself up. That's what you're required to do.
Yeah.
Simple as that.
And
go ahead.
I wrote down here, coaches listening to this, players, if you're following us on the podcast, thank you. And hopefully this helps clear it up. Coaches, when in doubt, teach your players to legally slide when in doubt. However, know that they could attempt to avoid contact, change the route, go around the catcher, or completely avoid all contact whatsoever. So when in doubt, legally slide, but next step, attempt to avoid that contact as a runner. Because you got to understand, the fielder, their focus is on the baseball. They cannot protect themselves. The runner, they're focusing on home plate. They're focusing on that base they're going to. They're able to change their direction to avoid injury for player safety of both players involved. Attempt to avoid contact or legally slide.
Yeah, I agree. There's a whole other bag of worms to open, can of worms to open when it comes to dealing with obstruction in these situations, and we can deal with that at another time. That can get pretty in depth, but coaches and players, make sure we're not blocking home plate without the baseball. That's the easiest way to do it. Let's not block home plate without the baseball. Most of the time, these situations, the one that I just described with a pitcher covering, they're not going to block home plate because they're diving for the front corner of that plate too. So we talked about when there's not a force play involved. When there's a force play involved, the rule does change, and it changes at all three levels. Okay, I'll get to the OBR rule in a little bit because I think that a lot of the youth leagues that utilize OBR rules have adopted a force play slide rule. Sean, would you agree with that?
Absolutely.
That's similar.
Yep.
That's more similar to the high school rule or the college rule. Would you say that they're probably more similar to the high school rule? Would that be correct?
Yep. Straight to.
Okay. Straight to. Okay. So anytime we have let's talk about the federation rule first. If you can imagine let's just say this. A runner who is sliding into a base in which a force play is being made on him must slide, if they choose to slide, in a direct line between first and second base, or second and third, or third and home, wherever that force play is occurring. They must slide in a direct line into that base, directly into the base, legally. They can't slide in the direction of the fielder, right? They can't peel off in the direction of the fielder. Are they allowed to go in standing up, Sean?
Yeah.
That's a good question. We've said already, we never require anybody to slide. At any base, we've never required anybody to slide. What we do say, though, is that you're not allowed to interfere or alter the play. Interfere with or alter the play. So if I go into second base standing up and I interfere or alter the play in the front end of a double play, I'm guilty of force play slide rule. Okay? So in order to not be guilty of a force play slide rule interference, I have a couple of options. I can always slide legally directly into the base. Always. I can slide in a direction away from the fielder. So if the shortstop's clearing the bag towards the right field side, and I slide away from the fielder on the third base side in a direction away from the fielder, I'm not guilty of the force play slide rule. If I peel off away from the fielder, obviously away from the fielder and don't interfere, then I'm not guilty of the force play slide rule. But if this rule is two parts, it's an interference rule and a safety rule. So if I don't have a safety concern and I don't interfere with the play, as long as I peel off away, as long as I don't slide in the direction of the fielder, right, I'm pretty good. A couple other things you can't do in high school baseball. You can't pop up and make contact on top of the base. So if I pop up on top of second base, I can't make contact or interfere. I can't slide through second base in high school baseball and make contact. So if I overslide in a direct line between first and second, I overslide second base, and I make contact on the back edge behind second base, the fielder's protected back there, and you'd be guilty of force play slide rule at that point in time. With force play slide rule, the penalty for that rule is always the runner who's guilty of the rule is out, and the batter runner is out as well. Does that make sense, Sean?
It makes perfect sense. And umpires, if you're in a tough situation with a coach and you just can't quite get them to grasp this force play slide rule, this is what I would always fall back on. Hey, coach, this is a player safety rule. I'm going to protect your fielders exactly the same way. Mm-hmm. We got to protect the fielders.
The easiest thing is if you never want to be guilty of force play slide rule, you can slide directly into the base and never be guilty of force play slide rule interference. Never.
All right, so mandatory slide myth busted. We're down to myth number 10 that we're going to cover today. And this is during a rundown. Runners must remain in the baseline all the time. And man, if I'm a coach, defensive coach especially, when I see that runner leaves the baseline, I'm running out there and I'm saying, they left the baseline. That's an automatic out. They're out. Andrew, what is the baseline?
Sean, this brings back memories.
I thought it would.
Yeah, this brings back some memories. And I'll let you tell that story in a second, but because you tell it better than I do. So the answer to the question, the runner must be in the baseline, that is absolutely 100% not true. what does it mean though? Like, what does being in the out? Now, a runner can be out for being out of the baseline. So you're like that. Those two things, they don't make sense to me. Those conflict. What are we talking about here? Well, the runner is out for being out of the baseline when they run more than 3 feet from a direct line from where they're at and the base they're attempting to reach when a player is attempting to make a tag. And that's the key right there. So if a player is attempting to make a tag, wherever that runner is required to not leave a 3-foot area to the left or to the right, right? Not more than 3 feet to the left and not more than 3 feet to the right. Then where they are in a direct line to that base from when the player is attempting to make a tag. That's what establishes the baseline. Where the player is, the base they're attempting to go to, and when the defender is attempting to make a tag. If there's no tag attempt, then there's no baseline. Where we see this a lot, Sean, is in a rundown, right? The runner is running to second base, they get caught in a rundown, run to second base, they turn and go back to first base, and they make a little bit of a wide turn because we're not on train tracks, right? So when we take a left turn, I might end up a little bit on the grass. You know what? And they throw the ball to first base, I turn back, and this time I turn to my right, and I end up a little bit further on the grass. And I'm more than 3 feet in a direct line between first and second base. That doesn't matter yet, right? We don't have a tag attempt. So runners are allowed to create whatever baseline they so choose in a legitimate attempt to advance to the next base, right? So once the tag attempt is made, if I run more than 3 feet, which umpires that are listening, what we typically use as a guideline for that, a step and a reach is a typical guideline. If they've gone more than a step and a reach from a fielder that's attempting to tag them, that most of the time that's 3 feet. That's just a cue for you to a mental and visual cue for you to help you judge these situations. But the big thing is that they can't run more than 3 feet to the left or the right in order to avoid a tag. If we don't have a tag, we don't have out of the baseline. So that's the biggest thing. So you can have rundowns that end up a few feet, into the infield grass. You can have rundowns that can end up sometimes, depending on where we started and what's going on. If we round at second base and we're trying to go to third and we end up in a rundown, that rundown can end up almost on the outfield grass, depending on how wide of a turn I took. We can't go more than 3 feet from where we're at in a direct line to the base we're attempting to advance to when they're attempting to make the tag. If they're not attempting to make the tag, we don't have that 3 feet guide yet. Make sense?
Makes total sense. And umpires, if you run into coaches that either don't understand the concept or aren't believing what you're saying about there is no baseline until there is a tag attempt, and it just so happens the coach's behavior awards them to leave the ballpark for the remainder of the game, challenge those coaches to go to a rule book, to go to some type of educational material and look up the rule. And if we're wrong as an umpire, let us know. And if you're right as an umpire, the coach, hopefully they're humble enough to come up to you and apologize and say, thank you for making me allow some time to go read the rule book. With that being said, Andrew, we just spent this podcast of myth busting of 10 plays that we see in baseball all the time. And if umpires understand the rules, it still doesn't settle the situation. So do you think there's a need for some type of book, some type of publishment of the rules of baseball? So umpires could use it for specific case plays. Yeah, we have the rule book, but, man, we talked about 3 different plays on each myth. What's your thoughts of having some type of book out there of case plays to back up these rules?
Well, hopefully that's going to be out pretty soon. And, there might be somebody that might be authoring something like that. So that's actually something I've been working on for the last 3 years, putting rules into easy to understand everyday language, breaking it down with some case plays and some things like that. So we're really I'm trying to get that, to a point where it's able to be published and put out into the world, starting with NCAA rules and then, moving on to Federation and OBR at some point in time down the road. But the biggest thing is we want to make sure that we give umpires an opportunity to study them in a way that makes sense, and hopefully coaches can utilize that book the same way and utilize it as a study guide as it's intended on how to really improve ourselves and what the rules are. But yeah, so that's something I've been working on. Hopefully that publishing goal will be met this summer, over the summertime, and be ready for next season. But I'm really excited about that opportunity and really excited about hopefully helping some folks out along the way. But yeah, like you said, studying the rules is hard because there are so many extraneous situations. We just have to make sure we sit down and break it into language that makes sense to us and have philosophies that allow us to put those rules into place and have verbiage and words that we use that fall within the rule book and that are easy to understand so we can explain it to other stakeholders in the game, including coaches, administrators, players, and spectators. The biggest thing is we all have to be on the same page. When we don't have a common understanding, that's when we end up with a lot of conflict. And that conflict can be avoided if we just really work hard to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Well, Andrew, we appreciate you taking time out with PSOA today. And when that book does come to tuition, please reach out to us. We'll do everything we can here within the podcast to promote it, to get it out there to umpires, to fans, to players, and to coaches. So thank you, listeners at home, listeners in the car, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thank you for taking time out with PSOA today. Follow us on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. Again, as this podcast transcribes and continues, we're going to be using our YouTube channel to show video of plays that we discussed today. Please keep on checking back. And until the next time out with PSOA, sports officials, remember, you're only as good as your last call.
A Herd at Sports Network production.